Welcome to Brilliantly British. My name is Lawrence, and today, as you can see, I have something extra special for you. This beautifully gorgeous thing that is just making adjectives roll off of my tongue is a Battenberg cake, and it is arguably the best cake that the UK has to offer, in my opinion, especially when it's made this way. So, as you sit in your chair with a cup of tea in hand and your feet up, relax and enjoy this episode. This cake is one of the most famous cakes from the UK. In its modern state, it will have 4 panes of sponge married with apricot jam before being wrapped in marzipan. It is sometimes referred to as church window pane or domino cake. Its origins are unclear, probably coming from one of 4 sources. In 1890, Frederick T. Vine wrote a Battenberg recipe as a simple fruitcake with raisins, having no panes whatsoever. Strangely, after 8 years, he released another Battenberg recipe, this time consisting of 9 checkered panes wrapped in marzipan. Confused? Good, for there's more. Another possible source is a Victorian magazine from 1898 showing a 9-paned domino cake. That same year, a recipe for a 4-paned cake wrapped in marzipan and pink desiccated coconut appeared in the Cakes and Buns book. The final source claims, though with no records, that the cake was invented to mark the wedding of Princess Victoria and Prince Louis of Battenberg. In my opinion, like most Brits, I'll opt for the royal wedding story, as it's the earliest and, well, sells better. Anyway, you now have some background. The real reason you're here is to learn how to make this amazing cake. So, let's do it. To make today's Battenberg cake, you will need the following ingredients in front of me here. Starting on this side, you will need some plain flour, some homemade butter, if you don't know how to make it, or if you haven't made it already, the link is up there. You will need some rosewater, some pink food coloring, some granulated sugar, some sliced almonds, some eggs, some marzipan, and some homemade apricot jam, which in this episode you will learn how to make. Now, finally, you're going to be baking, you need to stay hydrated, so get yourself a nice cup of hot tea. To make the apricot jam for this Battenberg cake, I first removed the stones, then chopped and weighed the fruit. With that weight in mind, in a deep pot, crush the fruit, then add an equal amount of sugar by weight before mixing the sugar and fruit together, and finally covering the pot, leaving the fruit and sugar to sit for 6 hours. To start ourselves off, I'm going to cream together my butter and my sugar until it's pale in color and nice and fluffy. With our butter and sugar creamed, it should look like this. And when it does look like this, you're ready to add your eggs. Into our cream butter mixture, we're going to add our eggs one at a time, adding another egg once the egg before has been fully incorporated, as you can see now. Okay, and the last egg. When all the eggs have been incorporated, you should have a beautifully fluffy emulsion. And when you do have that, you are ready for the next step. The next thing to do is to take your creamed butter, egg and sugar emulsion and split it in half, putting the other half in another bowl just like this. To this mixture, we're going to add the food coloring and the rosewater. And to the other one, we're going to add the almonds. Okay, both of the 2 halves of our Battenberg have been flavored. This one with almond and this one with rosewater. We're not done just yet, but just before we continue, I'd say that you should switch on your oven to begin preheating. So for this rosewater flavored half of the Battenberg cake, I'm going to sift in half of my flour and then mix that in until it's well incorporated. And then for the almond flavored half of this Battenberg cake, I'm also going to sift in the flour and then mix it in until it's well incorporated. With both Battenberg batters made and looking like this and like this, you're ready, just as I'm ready, to put these into the cake tin and bake these in the oven. Guys, what you have on screen in front of you now is a DT project that I worked on. Okay, no, I'm joking, because guys in the UK will understand. What it actually is me cheapening out and not buying the proper Battenberg cake tin. This is a makeshift way of getting around that problem because you can bake both your batters in both halves and it works out beautifully. All you need to do is put some baking paper over this just to make sure that your batter doesn't stick whilst it bakes. And that, my dear viewers, is how you cheapen out the proper way. Finally, the last thing to do before we bake our Battenberg batters is to put our mixtures into the tray. Okay, let's bake this. And once baked, your cake should look like this, as well as your flat or house smelling of cakes as well. With the cakes cooked, to save yourself a lot of trouble when constructing your Battenberg later on, I'd recommend, just as I'm doing, cooling them on a wire rack upside down so that you actually end up with two flat surfaces as opposed to just one surface and then you needing to slice off the top to make it flat later on. And whilst they're cool, just cover them with something, in this case, or in my case, a cloth. And that's it. Leave them to cool completely before beginning to construct your Battenberg. Now back to the jam. After 6 hours, the apricots will have released their juices, forming a syrup. And so, begin to cook the mixture over a medium-high heat, placing a small saucer in your freezer to test with later on. As the mixture bubbles away, stir often and skim off all of the foam that forms. As the mixture thickens, after 20 minutes of cooking, test the consistency every 2 minutes on your cold plate. The jam, when ready, should be able to hold a line once cooled on the plate. In the meantime, pick out your glass jars and sterilize them by filling them with boiled water. The lids will also need to be sterilized, so allow them to sit in hot water for a few minutes also. With the jam ready, immediately remove it from the heat and carefully fill your sterilized jars. To keep this video short, I've left out some following scenes, namely the sealing of the jars. To view this step in full, watch episode 17, Strawberry Jam, which is an in-depth jam making masterclass. Now, let's turn our attention back to the making of the cake. Okay, our cakes have cooled completely, and now what I'm going to do is tidy them up, and I'll show you exactly what I'm going to do. And what you want to do as well is make sure that both these cakes are the same width and they match perfectly, as you can see. Beautiful. And then with each of these cakes, we want to slice them in half. Okay, cakes have been prepped. Now it's time to move on to the next step. The next step involves measuring the dimensions of the Battenberg cake strips, height and length, which will determine how you roll out the marzipan. The marzipan will need to be 4 centimeters wider than the length of your cake strips to comfortably cover the cake lengthwise, and 8 times as long as the height of one strip, plus an extra 2 centimeters, in order to comfortably wrap around the constructed cake. The next step on screen now isn't necessary unless you're a show-off, and so, with a roller, I'll imprint a pattern into the marzipan which will form the cake's exterior. I'll then flip the marzipan over and then measure again in order to properly position the cake. As the saying goes, better to measure 100 times and cut once than to measure once and cut 100 times, or in this case, position. After that dose of wisdom, cut a straight edge in the marzipan and then spread a generous layer of apricot jam as a binder between the first strip and the marzipan. Use the apricot jam to also bind the second strip to the first, before layering more apricot jam on top of the 2 sponges to secure the coming layer. Speaking of the coming layer, make sure to lay alternate sponges atop one another in order to obtain the final checkerboard or window pane effect that this cake is famous for. Spread more of the jam along the remaining length of the marzipan. Then, my viewers, delicately, with love, with care, turn the cake over, completely engulfing the cake in the almond paste. With the cake rolled, smile and relax, for you have now made a Battenberg. For the sake of presentation though, ensure that the seam side of the cake is at the bottom, whilst also trimming off any excesses. To present, I dusted a small chopping board with icing sugar to prevent the cake from sticking, finally laying the cake seam side down. And we are done. Guys, it is now time to enjoy the fruits of your labour, namely tasting. Guys, we have arrived at this amazing moment where I'm about to slice into this and show you the beautiful cross section that makes a Battenberg cake a Battenberg cake. So here we go. Oh, I almost don't want to cut into this, but I have to show you. Wow, I mean, look at this. I've got to show you. I mean, look at this. Isn't that what you call beautiful? Amazing. Amazing. I'm done talking. I am so ready to taste this, and I'm pretty sure this looks, well, I'm pretty sure this will be as tasty as it looks. So here goes. Yeah. Oh man. Never has a cake made me almost feel emotional. This is delicious. I can taste every element in here. The almond cake that makes up is spectacular. Really cleanse my palate with a nice cup of tea. Oh, the tea is so good. And now I'm gonna taste the rose flavored part of the cake. Oh wow. Honestly, this is an experience beyond words. Guys, you must, of all things, at some point in your life, take the time to make this cake. It is 110% worth it. And always have a cup of tea at hand. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in and allowing me to show you how to make this beautiful thing in front of me, a Battenberg cake. At some point in your life, I assure you, take the time, make this thing. It will be 100% worth it. But before you do go off and run out of your door to get all of the ingredients, click the like button because I'm sure you like this episode. Subscribe to this channel. Follow us on all of the social media platforms that this channel is on. Tell everyone you know about the brilliantly British food on this channel, even strangers. And I will see you next time. How was that? A bit awkward, but okay. All right. Finally.